Howdy fellas, your boy is back because I finally had some games again and I've got an event, and actually it's just the Monday after the event and I've got a bit of time, got nothing to do, so already recording. There's a whole bunch of mess in my background because I had to basically disassemble my hobby room just to supply enough boards for the tournament, but we'll fix that, so that's all swell. First thing I will probably do here is just sort of talk about the event a little bit. Basically, we haven't had much going on in New South Wales for a decent while. Victoria is probably a little bit the same. They did have a 2-day tournament in maybe May this year, I think. But essentially, most of Australia's scene is happening up in Queensland. So it was good to get some actual games in my home state. We had quite a few interstaters, so I think probably about half the field was from interstate, if I'm honest, which for a 20-person tournament is probably a little bit too many. Like, you'd really hope that there'd be more New South Welshmen coming out, but hopefully with events actually happening, maybe that'll rouse a few people and get them going. But it was good to see basically all the Queenslanders, Victorians were happy to travel, so we could actually get a good event happening here, which was nice. I'll chat about my list specifically first, so I'll just hide myself for a second. So I had a lot of list ideas that I was sort of going through my head with before the event. I've got, if I wanted to be real serious, I've got my my Chariot Star Beast Herd list. It's still pretty much intact. I think that one is a little bit vulnerable these days because with KOE really quite popular across the world, and I've seen a few people running them in Australia, and I was suspecting a couple more than brought them would bring them to this tournament potentially. And I think they're a little bit vulnerable because KOE just have lords backed by Druidism that are better than my lords that are also backed by Druidism. So the Chariot Star becomes, I think, a bit of a liability when you've got, Advanced 8 and Advanced 10 flying cowboys around who'll go in and just win the combat. And there's nothing I can really do to stop them. Oftentimes when I've got an opponent who has a better character than me, I can stonewall them with the Shamanism Soothsayer, but he's never going to do enough damage back to the KOE guy to win anything, and the KOE guy's probably not going to break. It's just going to hold me there, and I'll end up being in a decent bit of trouble if I even hold, because there's a good chance they just end up, like, even the Shamanism guy's going to take some wounds eventually, and I don't have Steadfast, I don't have anything else, I don't even have a BSB to reroll the break test, so I think at the moment that list idea pretty much needs to stay on the shelf, even really for team tournaments, because I think that, between not really wanting to play Dread Elves, not wanting to play KOE, those are two pretty significantly popular armies that you probably don't want to play against, so I don't reckon the meta is very friendly to that list at the moment, so it probably won't be coming out for a while, I reckon. Other than that, I also had sort of the Warriors list that I took up to Queensland, which I had reports for a few months ago, which was like a whole bunch of Chosen, some Warriors, was all 7 Sins. I have added a Helmor to that because I wanted to get a bit more activity into the list, because I thought it was quite static and hard for me to make anything happen in the game, but there are a few things that I'd probably need to run the Helmor at a tournament. One of them's more practice, and the other is probably just some like templates to show exactly where the units can go and what you need to cover to block it and stuff. And I haven't really sorted any of that stuff out, so didn't want to take them. Was considering my demons, and that was really the front runner for quite a while for what I wanted to take, because I got the reports from the really small tournament I went to with it, It's that same sort of style, but I've made the magic a bit better, basically, by cutting down manifestations on the characters. Taking a few suggestions from Bobo, who's got way more experience and knowledge than me in it, so I think it's improved a lot, and is probably actually now quite a good list. Obviously, still taking Omen on Throne, so there are going to be sketchy moments, but I think it's probably my strongest list that I sort of have in my arsenal at the moment. But at the end, it just sort of fell to it that I found a Beast Herd list that I was enjoying. It's actually not quite this list, but I wrote a list that's quite blocky, that I thought other people would kind of like to play, because, you know, it's not shooting, it's not single models. It seems like about as friendly a list as you can write, in terms of the opponent having options and not feeling like they're just being run around or anything. This one is a different variant that I had to choose because I was lending my Beast Herd army to another player at the tournament, and this was stuff that he didn't take. So, curiously, our lists were so different that I didn't have to change much, but I had a shortage of Wildhorns and a shortage of Longhorns, which are both featured in my preferred list, basically. But anyway, what I ended up going with was a Druidism Master. He's got 2 Binding Scrolls, and I've got an Evoc Adept who's got the Seed of the Dark Forest and Crown of Horns, because he's my general. I've also got a Minotaur Chief BSB. I've got a big block of 40 Spear Mongrels, 3 Raiding Chariots, 15 Wildhorns with a Banner of Discipline. They do have Ambush, but mainly they are my bunker. So if my opponent doesn't have shooting or magic damage or whatever, and I don't need a bunker, then oftentimes they'll ambush, and I like to have that option, but usually they're sticking behind and they're just acting as a bunker for my characters. I actually do have an ambush on the Soothsayer, the Mongrels, and the Wildhorns, but I really never intend to use it with the Druid or the Mongrels. It's literally just because I had spare points. I didn't have any where I could put them, and it just felt better to have options than not. And I also like the idea that sometimes people might look at my list and question and be like, oh, wow, like, there was a podcast doing a list review, the Paired Weapons podcast, and the Beast Herd expert, basically, of the pair of them was looking at it going, that is a really bizarre choice for the ambushing Wizard Master. And he clearly has seen the option and thought, well, he must be ambushing him then. But mainly the reason I spent those 5 points is to make people think, he's going to ambush his Wizard Master, and not maybe just throw a few more questions in about what my list actually does. But anyway, the meat of the list otherwise is 8 Great Weapon Minnows, 15 Great Weapon Centaurs, both those boys have the Banner of Speed, 7 Razortusk Herd, a Razortusk Chariot, and then 2 Scouting Gargoyle units. I like the Banner of Speed on the Centaurs a lot, because I think Advance 9 is a significant upgrade over Advance 8. Really, from 7 to 8 is big, and from 8 to 9 is big. I think 9 to 10 is less significant, but Razortusk Chariot there gives them 10 and makes them really fast when I want that. But the Razortusk Chariot in this list I actually really, really like, because he's helpful to both. He's helpful to the Centaurs, but he's also helpful to the Minnows and the Razortusk, because that's pushing them up from 7 to 8, respectively. So I think it's a really handy piece, particularly because I don't need to sit next to any one of them. It helps all of them, and I can figure out what I need where. Like, do I need Advance 8 on either the Razors or the Minnows this round, or is there something I can do with... Advance 10's very good. So, being able to charge, 20 inches pretty easily is quite handy. And when I don't need it elsewhere, the Centaurs just love to have that as a little bit of an extra boost. Pretty much the list idea, obviously there's some model restraints happening. There's the fact that I'm trying to write a list that people probably will enjoy playing against, hopefully. But mainly, I've got the Evoc guy there because I like a little bit of extra damage spells when I need it. I didn't find myself actually using it all that often, to be honest, because even when I sent the Mongrels or the Raiding Chariots into a combat, I tended to think that giving them 4-up regen or +3 toughness was more significant than reroll to wound or anything. So I'm not actually sure that I need him, particularly because Druidism is quite a dice-hungry lore. But that's sort of like, I the thought behind my magic was, it's very hard to write a Beast Herd list that doesn't need Druidism, in my opinion. And I love an Evocation Adept for what they can bring to like Mongrel Herd or Raiding Chariots or Wildhorns, although I'm not sure that it's actually as significant as I might have thought prior to this event, basically. The double binding scroll I found super useful across the event. I don't think I've ever taken a binding scroll to a tournament before, so this was like my first instance of that, and having two was just... I rarely want to leave home without them. It does just mean that I need a character who will carry them, where usually I don't have... Like, normally I've got, all my characters are fighting, and I kit them out to fight, so... I definitely am a binding scroll convert though, and I'd like to fit him into more lists than I do. Pretty much, yeah. Like, there's no super smart overarching thought behind the list. Like, it's just Mongrel Herd fight pretty well. Centaurs fight really well. Minotaurs fight really well. The Razortusk Herd, I'm consistently surprised by how good they are. And the Raiding Chariots are just sort of there filling core and being an extra flanking threat. The only thing in the list really that I care about losing as well is the Minotaurs. Like, I mean, obviously I care about losing any of it, but the damage that all the other units can put out means oftentimes they're quite disposable in terms of, like, those Centaurs are usually going to do more than 500 points of damage if I use them well. So even if I lose them, it's like they've killed something valuable, they've probably got in the way, or they're threatening something else. They can very often like get at least their points and create a real headache just because they're so fast and all that sort of thing as well, which will come up in this game. But yeah, overall, the list is mainly something that I hoped that opponents wouldn't mind playing, basically, and would kind of enjoy the kind of games it creates. And it's just a bunch of big stuff that tries to do as much damage as possible. My first round opponent was running Kingdom of Equitaine. I don't have a great knowledge of the new book, really, but his general was on a Hippogriff, and he was advanced 10 and did a lot of damage. He also had a guy on a Pegasus who... I can't remember what most of this stuff does, to be honest, but I think he was multi-wounds against Fear, and I don't have any of that. And he was Divine, and I don't have many Aegis. I've only got one on my Minotaur Chief. He also had a Div Adept and a Witchcraft Adept. 2 units of Feudal Knights, a unit of Auto Sergeants, a unit of Peasants, a unit of Knights of the Quest, 4 Pegasus Knights with... so Banner of Discipline on the Feudal Knights and the Pegasus Knights because he doesn't have a BSB. And then he had some Chaff and Green Knight, basically. So when I look at this list realistically, the Pegasus are pretty decent, I assume, particularly if the character's in there to give them a boost. The Knights of the Quest are good, I think. And he's got 2 Lords that are scary. I don't think his magic is that scary. I am worried with my Great Weapons about wheel turns, because I really hate that spell. But really, it was those main things that I thought were concerning in the list, and there was a lot that was just like 6 Feudal Knights are sort of just scoring, and I'm not really very scared of what they're going to dish out. I'll get to the game. Some of these images have to be turned around because I took them on my phone. Okay. So here we've basically got a setup. This is the attacker-defender objective. So I had the big center. My opponent won the roll for sides, picked big flanks. I dropped a couple... We exchanged a couple of drops. He dropped his peasants early, I think. And he dropped his knights here early. And essentially what I ended up doing was once he dropped his knights there, I was sort of looking at it. They were at the corner of their deployment zone there. I had my centaurs up here, which meant that in the end, I think we were only 19 inches apart or something. So I knew that if I dropped my centaurs and my Razortusk Chariot there, I'd have a potential for a 19-inch charge turn 1. And I can scout my chaff to be wherever I need anyway. And if he stacks his flying characters or whatever over there that can't be chaffed, maybe that play can't happen, but I like to have the option. Like, I liked that as an idea anyway, and I thought that's a valuable thing to try and take turn 1 for. And that's essentially when I ended up dropping the rest of my guys. Mongrels this game are run 5 wide rather than their normal 8, just because against KoE there's not many wide frontages out there. The objective here was breakthrough. So I did ambush my Wildhorns in this game. And I used the Gargoyles. So I didn't scout these ones because I wanted to use them as a bunker for my characters. Even though he doesn't actually have many ranged attacks, I was a little bit worried about getting my pants pulled down by the Green Knight's breath weapon, basically. Off camera, just here is my chariots. And everything else, I mean, I assume it looks like what it is. You know, Minotaurs central, Razortusk guarding one of my flanks. Mongrel's here, Razortusk Chariot here, and Centaurs here. He's got his peasants over here. He popped his Pegasus Cowboy here, in between the peasants and a unit of feudals. He popped back here his Pegasus unit, and then he's got his Witchcraft Adept on his own. He's got his Green Knight here. His Yeomen have come up to frenzy bait my Minotaurs, and he's got his Hippogriff here, his Questing Knights here, and then he's got his Audio Sergeants and his Realm Knights over on the right. So I actually thought that he'd set up really well to defend my potential charge into the Knights over here. Because essentially what it was looking at here is I would have to maximize on those knights so that I'd bounce off the impassable terrain, in which case he'd have a charge into my flank with the Peg character and a charge into the front with his Pegasus unit. So I couldn't really do that. I was sort of umming and ahhing, knowing that I'm not really going to be able to get combat buffs over there, because there's no hill here. There's water here, but essentially there's nothing that can help with my Druidism range. So I was like, realistically, I can't do that. However, the character then ended up being 20 inches away. And so I sort of figured, needing a 10 first turn, I've got the chaff there if I need to. If I do push up with those guys, I'll probably be able to chaff. I'll probably be able to chaff sort of the things that matter, and the Pegasus Knights are too far away that they're only going to realistically get charged by the character on his own, and then I've probably got a champion, even if I don't. I kind of don't mind that fight anyway, I think, when he's on his own against me. So I decided to go for that, which my opponent actually didn't think about. I don't know if he thought about the Knight one from how he talked earlier, but he didn't think about this, basically, is what he said to me. This is one of those situations with the Centaurs where I was basically just sitting there going, I might lose them, but I think that Cowboy is more trouble for me than not so much more than my Centaurs are for him, but I didn't need the Centaurs as much as I wanted that guy not to be running around unchecked against my blocks. So I was like, if I can kill him and I lose the Centaurs, that's okay, because he does have to do a lot here to deal with the Centaurs anyway. My Minotaurs did fail their frenzy check, so I had to charge into these Yeomen, and I didn't love that. But I had, like, there were a lot of things that could charge them afterwards, so I was just going to sink all of my magic into them and hope for the best, basically. I did have a couple of ideas, like a couple of plays, but they didn't really work out. So I charged the Razortusk Chariot in as well, mainly so that on this corner, he could overrun and maybe get in the way of the questing knights. Maybe, I think he needed like a 10 to hit them, which would have been really helpful, but he didn't make it and he didn't quite get in the way. Because I think he went too far so that they could actually come down, get around them, and hit into my Minotaurs. So I don't know what the next picture will be, but we'll find out. Okay, so that's basically, that's the play that I'm talking about. I did get the Centaurs in over here, and I chaffed the Peasant Levy so that the subsequent combat, the Centaurs would be able to fight without being flanked or whatever. I'd moved up quite aggressively with the other things, but just Razortusks are more sort of like keeping these guys over here honest. And as I said, with the Razortusk Chariot, the plan is just to get him to overrun if I can. Essentially, what happens here is I blow up the Yeoman, and then, as I said, the overrun doesn't really help me in the final position. Against his Pegasus character, he did like 5, maybe 6 wounds to me. No, it can't have been that much. He must have been less, actually. He doesn't have that many attacks either. He did like maybe 3 or 4, but essentially, so I passed my Primal Fury. I had 8, 9, 13 attacks on him, hitting on 4s, winning on 2s, and would leave him with a 5-up, 5-up. I rolled real well, and I did 11 wounds to him, but then he managed to save with that 5-up, 5-up. I did 11 wounds, and he managed to save 9. So he was actually ended up alive on 1. I won the combat by 1, but I didn't break him. And that was sort of a moment of, I was very disappointed. I was like, I had him. I thought he was dead. And now this is going to be a problem over here for me. But realistically, I don't even think it was that unlucky. Because if I think about it, I needed to make the charge on a 10, and I got that. That's less than 50% already. I needed to pass Primal Fury on a 7, which is a 50-50 on its own. I maybe didn't need to, but the fact that I did definitely helped. Essentially, me doing 11 wounds over there was, I think, a big instance of good luck. Like, if I don't pass Primal Fury, 13 attacks, I would average 6.5 hits, so I'd maybe do 5 wounds. And in that case, with a 5-up, 5-up, you're probably not expecting to kill him. With past Primal Fury, it's what? 6.5 plus another 3, so it's sort of like 9 or 10. 9 or 10 hits, so 7, 8 wounds. And even then, you're probably expecting to do 3 wounds from that, but it's not that unlikely that a 5-up, 5-up survives 7 or 8 wounds. You see that sort of thing happen all the time. So I felt like it was really unlucky, but realistically, I don't think that it was. I didn't like the final position that I was in, but I was hoping maybe I could finish him off before those guys died. I'll see what the next picture is, but so that's the final position of that Razortusk Chariot, where he's not really helping much of anything. Or in fact, I think he was, but he failed his terror from the Lord, because he ran away next, basically. So can I rotate this? Rotate left. All right. So here is after he's fled, after he's countercharged, not with the pegs, but with the feudal knights into these centaurs, and then he's charged basically Green Knight, Equitane Lord, and Questers into my Minotaurs. My Minotaurs, I did get quite lucky though, because I got off Oaken Throne, I got off Healing Waters, he let it through, looking to stop Stone Skin. Then I tried to, I think, put Distracting on the Minotaurs with 2 dice, and my opponent rolled to dispel that, which left him with 4 dice against 3, I think, with Stone Skin, and he didn't beat me. I had +2 to cast, so slight advantage to him, But probably a risk he probably should have just let the other one go through to ensure that he could stop Stone Skin. But essentially, once they had that up, it was I would never charge them, basically. So I think in the end, basically what happened is he did 5 or 6 wounds. I butchered almost all the questing knights, but those guys all held. I only won by like 1 or 2, maybe. Because his lord went in and off his 7 attacks, he was hitting on 2s and wounding on 5s, but we realized that we played that wrong because apparently his lord is actually strength A on the charge. So we should have been hitting on 2s and wounding on 3s. But he still did like 4 wounds, I think, when he had the strength 5. His Green Knight was in a challenge with my BSB and wasn't doing too much of anything. And then he's questing. I don't know how many wounds they did, but they were needing 6s. They were with a reroll, but I think in the first round he forgot about the reroll. Like we both forgot about it, and then he forgot about it in the second, and I realized, wait a minute. But overall, I think the average there, given my buffs, is like, so the questing knights being 2 attacks each have what? There's 8 of them, so 17 hitting me on 2s because he boosted the I don't know. I can't be bothered figuring out. Whatever actually happened there, I was lucky to get the spells I did. I was unlucky to fail my my frenzy check, I guess, but I was lucky to get the spells I did. And then in the combat, it's probably a lot closer than I thought it might be, but the end result was basically that, I just butchered all of those units there. And then over on the left, my Centaurs actually were able to survive to do maybe 1 or 2 guys attacking the Lord. And I managed to do the last wound on him then, which actually panicked the levies because they had already fought the Gargoyles. And it panicked the Pegasus behind. So I lost my Centaurs, but what it got me was the Peasant, the Lord, and the Pegasus because of that lucky panic test, basically. Peasants really don't matter so much. A little bit for breakthrough, but I think that my Chariots probably do enough to hold them up long enough, maybe. I don't know. But the Pegasus failing was a pretty significant moment after I got the last wound on the Lord. So that sort of was basically game over on my opponent's turn 1. So the previous stuff had all happened on my turn 1. And this was his turn 1. These were his counter charges. And he had lost Pegasus character, the Peasants, 6 out of 8 of his questing knights, and he had a Green Knight left on 1 wound or something. And at that point, it was also his character's no longer charging. I was able to reform to get my champion in the middle, and he didn't have room to counteract that. But to get my champion in the middle so that his lord could only attack the champ, and he no longer had all his attacks from the questing knights, so it was a foregone conclusion that I was going to win there, with I think 6 of the Minotaurs remaining and the BSB. And all my buffs still to come. So the rest of the game is basically just mop-up duty. Here you can see the result of all those combats. Another one that we need done. Rotate left. So here, the questing knights are the only guys left alive. They're running away. I actually ran down his lord, which I guess because this happened on my turn. Actually, I don't know that it's that significant because I would have just charged him and probably just beaten him on his own anyway. The Mongrels actually charged and fought the Realm Knights and beat them, and they got away. You can see the one guy remaining there. And then I'm just sort of set up here, trying to keep these guys out of my objective, but also knowing that most likely thing here is I'm going to have Minotaurs, Mongrels, and my Wildhorns in his objective. It doesn't matter that much anyway. That's okay. So basically, that's the last picture I have. So I'll re-rotate and just tell you what happened. Basically, he ended up bringing these around, trying to fight the Razortusk with them, but he lost to the Razortusk. I think one of the rounds was pretty tight because he charged, and I didn't have any buffs. But after I stuck in through that, it was I got to buff, and he was off the charge, and again, it was a one that there was basically no way that I was going to lose. So the end results, I maybe didn't kill his folk hero, I'm not sure, but I killed everything else in his army, and I didn't lose that much. So it was a bit of luck, obviously, at play. There was, the Minotaurs in the middle was the big decisive thing. And I was lucky to get the magic through that I did, but at the same time, I think the correct play there, given that I did get the magic through, is that you can't charge those guys. Like, maybe he would need to chaff because maybe the Questing Knights couldn't have gotten away, based on where the Minotaurs were and couldn't get out of line of sight. But you could just chaff with the Green Knight. The Hippogriff guy is flying, 16 inches, whatever direction he wants. I think playing the game again, Angus would make a different decision there, I reckon, and not want to engage those Minotaurs in that moment. If I only had regen up, or if I only had Stone Skin up, maybe it's a different story. I do think potentially if I do lose those Minnows, obviously it's a bad time. But I had the Razortusk there, who then I could send into one of them, or maybe with an overrun into the other, depending on, because he'd have to pursue me with at least a couple. So maybe there was I think that I was, even if I lost them, I had a few options, because I had the Razortusk and at the time the Mongrels, so I had some pretty decent counter charges, and still obviously with very strong magic to back them up. But I think the better play from my opponent there would have been to avoid this block when it was magicked up. Charging the boosted minnows is most times just a way to lose your units. I think the only thing that was clever or interesting that I did this game in terms of my strategy and stuff was that idea with the Centaurs of seeing how deceptively close we are, because some of those deployments you don't really think about. You actually end up a lot closer than when you're 24 inches apart. Knowing that I could have advanced 10 on my Centaurs, and knowing that that was one of his scoring units, and not needing to charge, but then having that threat, and then being able to use it against his character, I thought was quite a sneaky little play, basically, because those Centaurs are so deceptively fast. That's basically that, though. So I got up a big 20 in my first game, which is, obviously the exact way you want to start this tournament. And I have some Ogre Khans next, which was a matchup that I maybe not so much fancied, but I didn't think it was bad. And some of the other matchups up there were bad. Like there was an Asklander's army that I felt like probably outfought me. There's a Dread Elf army that I'm almost 100% certain outfights me. And those two, I think, might have played. Maybe not. I'm missing a few things, but basically I managed to avoid those two ones that I was really nervous about in my round 2, and got to play Ogres that I thought... I'm not sure if it's advantageous or not, but I think it's completely playable in terms of... neither of us is a hard counter to the other, I don't believe. This one's been a bit of a long one because I rambled on a bit at the beginning, but thank you for sticking around if you have, and I'll have another one with you at some point in the future. Thanks, guys.